Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to another discussion video. Obviously, it's very difficult at the moment to know really what to talk about with no new movies coming out at the cinema, so we thought, why not take a look back? We always try and think of a topic to talk about. This video is probably going to be kept to about an hour, maybe just under. And there's a lot of, there's a few cinemas opening now, at least in the UK, select cinemas and everything like that, and they are playing older movies most of the time, which is great. And it's good to sort of like go back and sort of relive a lot of these older movies. And that kind of sparked the idea as, why don't we just talk about some of our favorite cinema going experiences? Now, these might not necessarily be the best movies ever made. I'm sure some of them will be, and we have an attachment to the film itself for genuinely being good. But this is more sort of the experience, a really memorable time at the cinema, whether it was like a big event movie, and I'm sure we'll see a few in there, or maybe it's just like a smaller scale, like an indie cinema or something that we went to, but we have like such a vivid memory of seeing a particular film at the cinema. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. So this is going to be recorded ahead of time, so you guys will be seeing this video much later today. But obviously, if you are watching this video at this point, do comment and let us know some of your favorite cinema going experiences as well. Any particular movies that stand out. And Tayte is going to hit you up with the socials right now.
Yes, I am. So please follow us on all the platforms. We do this on every single video. So it is on Facebook. You just type in Cinema Savvy and you'll find us on there. On Twitter at cinema_savvy. On Instagram at cinema_savvy as well. And if you want to, go to TeePublic as well. Link is in the description and you can pick up a Cinema Savvy t-shirt.
Nice. And yeah.
So before we get into this, Chris has kind of touched upon cinemas being open. One of the reasons, not just for this video, but we're in a pretty dire state. Not the fact that no films have come out for 4 months, because you've had Trolls 2 World Tour on video on demand premium if you wanted to pay $20 to rent it for 48 hours. Basically, cinemas at this point in time are not screwed yet, but they're quite close to being screwed. That's the politest way I can put that. Obviously, many people are relying on Warner Brothers to release Tenet. It went from the 17th of July to the 31st of July to the 12th of August. And now, finally, they've understood that there will not ever be a global release date, that the whole world can go to the cinema on the same day to watch this film. So the latest discussion as of last night on Variety was the European audiences can expect it between the 26th and 28th of August, and any cinemas in America that are open might get it Labor Day weekend. I don't know. I think that's some point in September. But basically, it's looking like that European and Asian audiences will get films first for the big releases, the releases that will make it out. Bill and Ted last night announced that their domestic American release is going to be premium video on demand, but they have different distribution holders to those in England and Europe. So we've got Warner Brothers who are likely to put it in cinemas on that same date. So it's kind of a sad reality is that we're at a point where no films have come out in 4 months. Certain instance, it's beautiful. Me and Chris watched Empire Strikes Back. We did a video on that. Chris, you've seen a lot more films live, showing classic films at good prices too, because they can't really make anyone pay big money to come in and watch a 20, 30-year-old film. As great as they can be sometimes, that's the reality of it. Most cinemas make their money through concessions. That's why we all moan about drinks prices, food prices. If you look at a price of a cinema ticket, the way we kind of studied it was, say a big film opens, you'll get like a 70-30 split, with the cinema getting the 30% and the distributor getting 70%. And over time, that drops and drops and drops and drops. To, if it's lucky, it's around 8 weeks, the cinemas might make more money. So they make pretty much all their profits off concessions. If there's no new films out, they can't obviously make ticket money, let alone making money on concessions, which is why Cineworld and View have both delayed. In England, certainly, guys, Odeon has staggered their releases. Chris, you're lucky you've got one near you that's open. I think we've got about 10 Odeons open in the country at the minute. Most independent cinemas are either going bankrupt or have said we're going to aim for September. That's when the furlough job scheme stuff comes to an end. So on a really big downer, not to put pressure on it, but it seems to me like the industry is relying on Tenet. Disney moved Mulan 2 days ago. Paramount moved Top Gun. A Quiet Place Part 2. Disney's obviously delayed the Avatars and the Star Wars films, but they're years away anyway. There's not really an issue in that respect. Oscar films are getting moved. Last Jaws coming out at the end of next year. Tayte, what's the Wes Anderson one? French Dispatch?
French Dispatch, yeah.
That now has no release date. I think they're going to move that to like February because the Oscars are later on in the year, so they'll release it later. So the whole cinema this week jumped after Tenet moved again. So obviously, when there is an announcement for the Tenet release date, we will obviously not do a video on it, but we'll put it on our social medias. But that is the state of cinemas right now. And it shouldn't rely on a film coming out. It should be up to government to support them, but they're not getting that. They've had furlough, which has helped. But the next month is very much crucial because, personally, not to go off on too much of a tangent because we need to get on with video, if I think cinemas are going to transition now, lockdowns happened, indie films, I don't think you're going to get cinema releases. No indie films, no small budget films. You've now got like a year and a half of blockbusters getting weekly slots. But less people are going to go. That's a sad acceptable. I don't think you're going to get film grossing $1 billion until, if you're lucky, next summer. I think less people will go. That's a sad reality, but you can't keep delaying films because not everyone has to go to the cinema. Although we want to, films aren't going to make the money they make for at least until the vaccines are out. So that's all I'm going to say on that. I think we need to go off the tangent.
Yes, we'll take our gaze away from the post-apocalyptic view of cinemas that we've got at the moment. The smoking ruin.
Let's go to a simpler time, guys.
Yes. So how this is going to work is, I guess it's kind of going to function as one of our list videos. We've got 5 picks each, and our respective lists are going to be ordered and ranked in the year that we went to see them. So obviously, the further back, that is the first one that gets nominated. And we're going to work our way up to present day. So I guess we should go. Should we stick to this order? So me, Tate, George, and we just go work through it that way. Okay, so my number 5 pick, we're going to the wonderful year of 2005. This is a film that we recently watched on the channel as a drunk watch along. I can remember about half of it. It's Revenge of the Sith. So this was a simpler time for Star Wars when, you knew where you stood. You had episode 4, 5, and 6. We'd work our way backwards to that, to the original films, 1, 2, and 3. And 3 was massive. The merchandise was there. I was the right age for it. When would I be? I think I'd been about 12, 13 years old when it came out. Kind of like the prime age for it, really. And already it was a packed house. I still remember it. I can remember where I was sitting in the screening. And everyone kind of knew where the film was leading up to. It was leading up to that big end dramatic fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin. And at that time, we thought that was going to be the final Star Wars movie. There's an argument for some people. Maybe it should have been. But here we are anyway. And we will be hearing from more Star Wars movies later on, I'm sure, in your guys' lists. But it was just incredible. It was emotional. Even then, it was emotional at the ending when it hits the binary sunset and the music kicks in, because you genuinely thought that was it. It was going to be that 6-film saga. The story had come full circle. It was a big part of my childhood, and I also loved the originals as well. So it was great then leading into that too. A memory that I distinctly have with it is when Anakin's burning, and it is quite horrific. It was the first Star Wars movie to be a 12A. I remember I was loving it. I was like, yes, this is cool. But I was looking around and there were some kids that were younger than me there, and they were with their dads and stuff like that. And their dads were having to shield their eyes because, kids were crying and shit. It was really horrific. So I just remember distinctly that scene, seeing Vader again, the breath. There's so many major moments that obviously now I've had years of, watching it and sort of understanding it more from when I first watched it. But I'll never forget that time, because to me, that was still kind of that sense of finality. And I know now we've had more, but back then it was quite a special moment to kind of see the final Star Wars movie in cinema.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in with that and say it was very similar. I was a bit younger. I was 8, turning 9 around Revenge of the Sith. And to me, it was, I remember the binary sunset and the credits came up. I was like, it's over. Star Wars is finished. And obviously, at that age, I've been obsessed for 6 years when Phantom Menace came on. That was a very big part of my childhood. And to this day, I still remember not just Revenge of the Sith, but the Disney takeover announcement, which I was absolutely mortified, and then took me a week to get over it, and I was fine. Mm-hmm. But I think Revenge of the Sith was an event film, certainly for our generation. Yeah. It was the tail end, and obviously generations before us speak about Return of the Jedi, and will the next generation speak about Episode 9? Of course they will, don't get me wrong, but I think the next generation's end was Endgame. Mm-hmm. That's a very different conversation, but that's just how the generational.
Yeah, we'll get on to event films in a bit. I kind of agree with this one. I have distinct memories of going to go see this in the cinema, and it did stick with me, but it didn't make the list.
That's the thing we should mention. Like, we probably had way more than just 5.
Yeah,
I was speaking to George before we went live. We were trying to crop our lists down to just 5. So yeah, it's very difficult. Very difficult.
I guess I'm going next. The first pick I have here is a film which is a little bit older than Revenge of the Sith. In fact, it's a film that was released when I wasn't even born, when I don't think any of us were born. It is Blade Runner. And I remember it was 2017. And it was 35 years after the original release of the film, and they put out the 4K cut, 4K version of the final cut. And it was one of those kind of on a whim moments. I hadn't realized it was happening. Me and my dad booked in tickets the day before. We got horrific seats off to the side. But when we finally got into the cinema and finally got down watching it, it was just stunning. It was just beyond beautiful. Like, watching the film at home doesn't really do it justice as to watching it on a big screen. And I know the film was different when it was first released, and there have been many cuts that have been taken since then. But I'm glad that I was able to kind of see this cut as being my first cinematic experience with this film, because everything from the surround sound music to the amazing visuals, just the atmosphere, everyone in the screen was mesmerized by it. And that's kind of one of the experience that really sticks out for me.
I would say I think that was one of the, because I went to see that cut too. It came to my local Odeon, and I believe that was probably one of the first sort of like old film rescreenings that I went to see. And I always love it. You could see like the film grain on the screen. I was like, oh, this is going to be good. And then it's the opening scene where the Vangelis music kicks in, and you have like the close up of the eye and the flames and everything, and just the 4K transfer in itself. Just that shot alone, I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. And it really was. And then that's kind of sparked all the rescreenings that I go to now. Really, I love going to see older films.
I've I've somehow never seen it at the cinema. I always see it advertised, the back-to-back cuts at Prince Charles with 2049, and I've just never been able to see it, which is a shame because I bet it's incredible live. I know they were trying to do it live in music as well, but I'm actually quite envious of that. So I'm going to jump with my number 5. This is probably definitely the one this is going to be mentioned. I've gone for Tron Legacy, which is actually celebrating its 10th anniversary, the tail end of this year. This film had a tremendous impact on me for many insane reasons. This was the first ever film I saw in IMAX. And this is the main reason it's here. It was just after Christmas. It was one of my best friends' dad's like, we're all going to the IMAX in Birmingham. Do you want to come? I was like, what are you watching? He's like, Tron. So I've never seen Tron, but I keep seeing these really cool adverts for this motorbike thing. And I remember sitting down. This is unfortunately IMAX is gone now. It's at the Think Tank Museum. If anyone knows Birmingham, it was incredible. I used to go there for years. And it says at the start of the film, it puts a message up saying that this film was completely shot in IMAX, except the scene set on Earth, basically. I was like, I don't know what IMAX is, but everyone raves about it. And then you had you guys have all been to IMAX since. You get that trailer, the IMAX trailer. You get the sound, the jet engine going over your head. You get the giant screen, and I was blown away. And then the film started. This film is in my top 20 of all time, still for these reasons. The killer soundtrack from Daft Punk is one of my favorite soundtracks ever made. And it's ridiculous because it's like 120 quid to get it on vinyl, which I won't pay. The visuals are unparalleled still. I know, except the Jeff Bridges de-aging, which I believe was the first time Disney did that.
We'll give it a free pass because it was the first time that it was attempted, but it hasn't aged well now.
Yeah, it's not aged great.
Here's the thing: it has aged better than other films which have come out afterwards.
This is the thing, isn't it? It was all in a studio. If you look at The Mandalorian behind the scenes, they built a new studio for Mandalorian to be filmed where it's all projected. Tron looks like that, and I know it was so expensive, and it did make its money back. But alas, we've been robbed of Tron 3 thanks to Tomorrowland, because apparently on the dots Tomorrowland interferes with the profits of Tron. But that film is more so there because the experience of watching that, the impact that had for a couple of years, is incredible. And I mean, you guys know I'm like on the chat. If any Tron news comes up, I jump to it. There was meant to be a big announcement last month, but the announcement was there was no announcement. They had a Disney Plus TV series, which they discussed but dropped because apparently it would have been too expensive financially. But they use the Mandalorian tech. I really don't think what's expensive about having black walls and blue lights. So, a different conversation, but that was my fifth choice.
I still actually haven't seen any of the Tron movies, not beginning to end anyway.
Wow.
I've seen little bits of Tron Legacy.
Chris, you need to go and watch Tron Legacy.
I need to. Well, no, I need to go and watch Tron first, and then Tron Legacy.
Fair enough,
But no, it's definitely on my one to watch. The visuals look great from what I've seen, and I love that kind of sort of. It's not even cyber. Is it cyberpunk? Is that what you call it? That kind of neon sort of style.
It's cyberpunk. It's neon punk. It's like, yeah.
And the light cycles are amazing. I love that stuff. So
there's the sequence in the first to end the first third. The sort of 20 minutes of the games is still some of the best stuff I've ever seen ever. I'm not going to say it's the best one ever. No, it's not. There are weaknesses. I think they did enough to justify a sequel where they could have took it further. But yeah.
So we're going with my number 4 pick now. We're going to fast forward to 2010. I'm going to try and keep this brief because I think I've given this anecdote. I've talked about this film a lot on the channel. It's Toy Story 3. This movie, it's probably the most sort of like emotionally wrought I've ever been at a film since that I've seen that I can remember. This was massive. So Toy Story, as I'm sure it was for all of us, was a big part of our childhood. We sort of grew up with the character of Andy, and I think that's particularly why I had such an emotional connection to Toy Story 3. In the movie, Andy's going off to college, and I think it was around about that same time where me and my friends were all off to university, or we'd started our first year. I'm not sure when it would have been. Oh no, we were gearing up for it in 2010. We were gearing up for it. We're preparing for it. And it was like a goodbye to your childhood. It was that farewell piece. And, you know, since then now we've had Toy Story 4, which was fine. I enjoyed Toy Story 4. But to me, Toy Story 3 will still be that ending. And it's kind of like the Revenge of the Sith thing where you go into it with that sense of finality. At the time, we thought that was going to be the final Toy Story movie. Maybe it should have been. But there are so many moments, like I was on the edge of my seat. I know that's a really cliche term, but I genuinely was. I was in it. I have never been so invested in a movie and its characters and what was happening before me. The furnace scene, my God, like I need to cast my mind back to the emotions that were running through my head at that time, because I wasn't checking my watch. I didn't know how much running time of the movie we had left to go. I thought they genuinely, if any studio was going to do it, it would be Pixar that would end the movie.
Imagine if they just cut the movie there,
just credits, straight after,
credits straight away, straight after. No before,
yeah.
No handing over the toys, just in the furnace, just.
It's like a Terminator 2 ending where you've just got like Woody's melting.
Oh my God!
Like going into and it was horrific. And then obviously, thankfully, the aliens come in and they all live. Spoiler alert. But then you get to the ending, and it was perfectly done. It came full circle. You have Andy one by one passing the toys to Bonnie, and then you hit the last two, Buzz and Woody, and then it kind of hit. It was in that moment where it hit me because I had a Woody and Buzz doll growing up, and it makes the same noises that they make in the film. And I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. I remember distinctly coming out of that screening. I went with a bunch of friends and they were all loving it, going like, oh my God, it was amazing. What did you think, Chris? And I couldn't talk. I was like stunned to silence because I didn't cry in the cinema. I kept it contained, and that was worse. And I didn't get my full emotional release until buying it on Blu-ray the following year, getting it for a Christmas movie, and being in floods of tears at 10 a.m. in the morning watching Toy Story 3 on Blu-ray. That's my Toy Story 3 story. But yeah, it's one of my favorite films. I'll never forget that moment of seeing it for the first time. It will stay with me forever. But yeah, Toy Story 3.
I think most people cried at the furnace on the first viewing. That I remember, you know, you get these memes like when Finding Dora's come out, it's people like, I've waited years for this. I'm like, shut up. Like Toy Story 3 was the original. I've waited years for this. Mm-hmm. And then it was weird because Toy Story 4 to jump on it quickly. Like it was fine. It was like an epilogue we didn't need, but I cried at the opening scene of Toy Story 4. I still don't know why or how, but there's the Toy Story. I think it's had this subconscious
You've got a friend
impact.
in me, you know, like every time that song plays, it's just...
I think Toy Story just has this effect, certainly to our generation. I think a couple younger people might be more Nemo-ish or like Monsters Inc. But I think certainly us three, like that sort of born by like 96, 97 time. I think Toy Story is your Pixar film that nothing can compare to.
I'll be honest, Toy Story 2 for me is...
Yeah, that's my favorite one.
Yeah, it is It's always up to for debate in my mind of which is my favorite Pixar film, but Toy Story 2 kind of pulls through in the end usually.
And it was weird seeing Toy Story. I'll end it on this, but like going to see Toy Story 4 and seeing kids in the audience that weren't even alive when Toy Story 3 came out. And that blew my mind. I was like, this isn't your movie. Like, this isn't your. I'm here. This is mine. So I have taken ownership of this franchise. But that's my number 4 pick.
So I'm skipping forward again in time. I will say all of my picks for my favorite cinema experiences all happened within the space of 2 years, which is really weird. But maybe it's because I didn't really experience cinema as much when I was a kid. The experiences I had were either films that I didn't really kind of have a long-lasting effect on me, or films that just, were plain awful and I hate for other reasons. I could talk about Prometheus all day, to be honest, in that experience, but these are the best cinema experiences. These are the ones that stick with us the most. And the next one was an event film. I would arguably say the bigger event film than the one that came afterwards. This is Infinity War, and this is opening night. And I remember going into the cinema and it being packed. I remember having to book it, like waiting for the booking to come online. I think everyone did, to go and see this film. And to have so many films building up to this one kind of thing. There was so much speculation going on, what was going to happen. No one knew anything. The trailers didn't give away anything. And it was such a big event film for that.
Well, the trailers put in scenes that weren't even in the final movie or were changed. That's a big thing with it.
But they left us guessing up until the final minute. And then when the film actually happened, it was straight away, okay, first of all, this is the best MCU movie they've put out. Whilst it was happening, whilst watching it, it was just like, okay, they have gone all out here. The villain is the most threatening that they've had. The characters are finally kind of dealing with their issues and stuff like that. We're getting the biggest battles. We're getting the biggest fights. We're getting like some of the biggest names getting dropped, like Hulk at the start. We're going to be spoiling this movie here, by the way. It's been out for 2 years, so it's all good. But when the snap happened, I think that one moment in cinema will stick with me. The stunned silence that was from the entire screening. And I was in a screening where people were actually cheering and stuff like that for the heroes. It felt like a proper American screening. And then the second the snap happened, dead silence for the rest of the film. The final 5 minutes of the film, including the end credits, like for the first 4 or 5 seconds of the end credits, no one spoke a word. And it was just like everyone was completely stunned by what had just happened. And congrats to Marvel for pulling that off. I know they couldn't possibly replicate that in the future. And Endgame, Endgame's grown on me. But for me, Infinity War, the experience of watching that, it doesn't compare. It just doesn't.
I agree. I remember Endgame being way more manic. Like they were having to add new screenings in earlier times just to accommodate the sheer amount of people. So Endgame was definitely a lot bigger. But for me, maybe it's just a preference of me because I do prefer Infinity War a lot more as a movie. It was just that experience of sitting there and going, like, they did it. The Russos did it. This is everything.
The Mad Men did it.
Like 11 years, 10 or 11 years at that point has come to this, and they nailed it. And you're right. And the Alan Silvestri score is one of the best. It's one of the best.
Even for You is one of those songs which I will stick on if I'm brooding or something like that. Yeah,
and it was the ending, and I remember everyone remaining seated. It was like a sort of like in memoriam kind of thing at the end when they all died. And the one bit, like there's no fancy credits or anything like that, mad visuals or anything. It's literally just white text on a black screen. And then that Avengers riff kicks in on piano and the Avengers title disappears into ash. I was like, that's how you end it. And because
that's how you leave it on a cliffhanger.
Because it's a 2-part film, it's the perfect sort of like end of Act 1 ending that you could do. That was going to be on my list as well, but when I knew that you had it on yours, I switched it because I wanted a different pick.
See, it's not in my top 5. It was probably in the top 10 to 15. I think I've told you both before, I was all out for this. I've got friends from school where we watched pretty much every Marvel film across 10 years. We're like a little trio. We went to the BFI IMAX. It was all perfect. We were all hyped. Then the film started, and then select cheering from certain corners of the cinema every time their favorite Avenger appeared. And what's this one Marvel film? This is the only Marvel film where every Avenger ever made appears. So Unfortunately, the experience was not what I hoped. Having the BFI, like going to BFI was great, but it kind of ruined it. And also, I'm going to be the guy that happily admits to anyone watching this was at that midnight screening. The one guy laughing when Peter Parker died was me, and I take all the praise in the world. I had some guy throws in front. People were starting to shut up because of how loud he was. That put me off. I did Endgame at like my local IMAX. I forget going to London again.
I still have this, which is my pop figure with sand on the inside of Iron Spider, which was given to me as a birthday present.
Still a better Spider-Man than Tom Holland, but it was the both of them. It's incredible because I think they may be some of the last event films of our time. Like I don't think there's ever been anything like it. I mean, Chris will say Lord of the Rings. I was too young to know back in 2003, but that'd have been this journey 1, 2, 3 done. Revenge of the Sith.
George, it depends on how well they pull off Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Well, they've been delayed again. They were due to come out in 2013, and here we are in 2020.
I know.
Well, Cameron's got to get it just right. He's got to get all of his expansive lore in his little notepad, and Neytiri's grandfather was this ancient tribe's clansman, all that thing. He's got to get all that in line, and then it's going to be the greatest films ever. It's going to be the best saga. It's going to rival Star Wars.
They got to throw in some riots in there, some race riots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
To be relevant with modern times.
He says he's delayed it. He said he's delayed it for the safety of his crew so they don't die. I was like, isn't this the same guy that tried to drown one of his cast members on the Abyss because he wanted a drowning reaction?
And Titanic.
Yeah, and I'm just sat there like, you can't say you care about your crew. You almost murdered someone on your old film. Different conversation. Avatar 2 fans, I'm not sorry. One day it will be when that film comes out, it will be a meme. I hope it's good. I want it to be good, but yeah. Avatar 2.
Okay, George, your next film.
So my next one's a bit of a weird one. So we've all been to many films in concert. We know they're going to get discussed. For those that don't know the concept, a film comes up at a concert, like a venue. They play the film, and there's an orchestra doing the soundtrack. So the very first one I went to of these was Interstellar Live in 2015. I'm sorry I'm boring you two the same story over and over again.
That's cool.
This is still to this day the best of these I've ever been to. Probably the best I'll ever go to, brackets, unless they do Inception. But the big thing with this one was that obviously the film had been out for 6 months. So it was the morning of WrestleMania. So I remember being up till 4 in the morning watching WrestleMania as you used to. And then I had to wake up at 7 to go to London with my mum because my mum loves Hans Zimmer. And we obviously got checked in the hotel. We made a weekend of it. But we went out. I'd never been to the Albert Hall before, and I've been there a fair few times since. But I was like, okay. We went out for a meal. It was really cool. I was like, let's take a walk around the venue because I don't know if you guys have been to like football stadiums. I always walk around a stadium when I go for the first time just so you can see it all. I did it to the Albert Hall. It's a nice little circle. We approached this blocked off area. I was like, oh, what's this? And there was a red carpet and there was a couple of people there. And this is obviously way before I used to do premieres and autographs and stuff like that. And I remember like, oh, let's stick around with the red carpet. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. Should I have a pen? I was like, no. Mom's with it. She's always got a pen, but I had nothing to get signed. We waited half an hour and then a car pulled out and I think it's Kip Thorne who did basically, sorry, I forgot to jump in. They'd hyped up a big Q&A for the film, so I knew that Nolan, Zimmer, Stephen Hawkins, what's his name? Brian Cox, Kip Thorne, Michael Caine, Jessica Chastain, like everyone was going to be there for this random event in London. I think it was like the day after the Empire Awards, so they all got loads of nominations. And we waited half an hour, and then it happened. The car started pulling up, and there he was. Lord Christopher Nolan stepped out of a car in a full suit. You guys can only imagine how mentally I was. I was unstable. I was like one of them like people that screeches at premieres, and actually screech though. But I was losing my mind. I had nothing to get signed. I didn't do selfies. I was not photogenic. I'm still not massively photogenic. And there are pictures across YouTube and them of my Facebook where I did get to meet them all one by one. Stephen Hawkins wheeled past us, which was just incredible just to see him in person. Like, I said something horrible, but it's exactly how you'd imagine. That's what I can say. Like, he just wheeled past, like, this is incredible. Hans Zimmer came over, asked for a photo, was really polite. He said yes. Christopher Nolan was nearby, and I took a photo of me and him about from 3 people away, where he's not looking because he's signing autographs. And I was so like starstruck. I'd never done a red carpet or anything. And then I called him over. He did a photo, and as he turned away, I just like shouted like legend because I didn't know what to do. So I got a photo of him, which is like very, very like big for me. Michael Caine said, "No, I don't do photos, but enjoy the show." But it's like, that's still pretty cool. And then my camera broke with Jessica Chastain, so I look like I'm a psycho murderer. But anyway, that was before, and then it started, and you all know how the Interstellar soundtrack is. The big thing with this one was that Hans Zimmer was performing in the orchestra for the entire night. Like, forget the fact he did Ikune, he performed, and it was just incredible. That was the second time I'd seen him. But the whole thing was just, I've not seen Interstellar since. I intend on watching it at some point over the next month. But because of how high those standards were, we were row number 1. We got neck cramp because obviously you have to angle up like that. But that is a day that I can't ever have taken away from me. And it's just a shame because here I am 5 years later, 1 year later, collecting autographs. And I was there like, I met kind of everyone I would have wanted to have met 5 years ago, but I didn't have anything for them to sign. But at the end of the day, I can't moan. It was incredible. And yeah, bit of a random one.
No, that's awesome. I mean, we've been to a few more of these concerts now since then, but I think you mentioned there was like a church organ playing.
Yeah, so
that would have
the
been
Albert Hall church organ. I don't know. It's one of. I'm not going to sit and do music facts, but I believe it's one of the best ones in the country, apparently. Mm-hmm. So the original soundtrack was recorded at a church in London for the organ scenes. But obviously, that organ, and Hans Zimmer did an interview saying that Albert Hall contacted me saying there is one day for me to do a film and I had to pick. And he went for Interstellar because it was newer, but he said that he couldn't justify picking another film when the Albert Hall has that church organ. Mm-hmm. And that the docking scene got a standing ovation. And actually the biggest ovation of the night was the church organ player when he came down after the film finished. Not Zimmer, not Nolan, not anyone. It was him because it was incredible. I think there's YouTube videos of it, but the floor was like shaking and vibrating. It was nothing like it.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Right. My next movie is going to be significantly less interesting than that, but it's still a very good movie. So I believe, when did I go and see this? I think it was 2016. It was either 2016 or just into 2017. It was at a very, very small cinema in London, and I can't for the life of me remember which cinema it was. I've just had a look really quickly. It may have been the Electric Cinema, that name standing out to me. It could be the Electric Cinema in London. Very, very small Edwardian style cinema. And I was with a friend at the time going around London, and we saw that a movie called True Romance was playing. Now, it's a film that I'd heard the main theme. I believe Hans Zimmer did the music to that as well. And I didn't know anything else beyond that. I didn't know who directed it, who had written it. And then I would find out when... So we all sat down. So one of the attendants came out, and it's the first film that I've ever been to where someone comes and gives like a little bit of an introduction to the film, talks about when it was made, how it was made, things to look out for in the film. And it was this really cool, nice sort of cozy environment. It was a fairly small screening, and it was like a blind watch of True Romance. So it's the 1993 Tony Scott movie, the late great Tony Scott, who did Top Gun, Crimson Tide, and Beverly Hills Cop 2. And then I found out it was written by Tarantino when the opening credits were coming up. And for all intents and purposes, it is a Tarantino movie. It was like discovering this long-lost Tarantino movie that I'd never seen before, didn't know anything about. And it's got the script, like obviously it's written by him, but just that fast-moving dialogue, that really well-written dialogue. And I had a blast. And I've never done sort of like a blind screening before. I always kind of like to know what I'm going into before I go and see a movie. Even if it's like a new release that I technically haven't seen, you see a bunch of trailers for it. We're kind of spoilt now in terms of everything that happens with movies and all the news that is available to us leading into a movie. Most of the time you kind of feel like you've pretty much seen the movie before you've even seen it. But this was just a really nice experience. I've never really had an experience like this with a movie where I've gone into it completely cold, absolutely loved it, and it stayed with me. Now, the thing is, I haven't watched that movie since, and I really want to. I know we were debating whether to do it for the Tarantino retrospective that we did. It's technically not a Tarantino movie, although it functions as one. This was mostly just from the experience of being in that smaller theater and the introduction and everything. And it kind of took it back to its roots of this is what cinema's all about, and just going to experience a movie. And it was just really nice. It was a really nice environment, and I'd like to go back to that cinema again at some point.
I have yet to see True Romance.
Very good. So very good.
It is. It's on my list of things to see. But I have to say, small cinema experiences are phenomenal, fantastic if you're able to get into them. In fact, my next film is a small cinema experience. Now, I think it was 2018. It was getting towards the end of the year. And it was, I want to say it was 100 years since the end, or would have been start. What was it? Was it based on an anniversary, or was it?
The 100th anniversary of the war ending.
Yeah, 100th anniversary of the war ending. And there was going to be a film put out by Peter Jackson. And people know Peter Jackson for doing Lord of the Rings. That's all that he's really known for. I know he's done other films, but that's what he's been made famous for. And he's gone and made a documentary. He's gone into the archives and he has gone and colorized some World War I footage. So as soon as the tickets became available, I immediately got them. Like, it was one of those things where I'm going to go and see this opening night. And they did a Q&A as well. And it's probably the first film that I've gone into where they've handed you a piece of paper when you go into the screen. And on the piece of paper, double-sided, filled with information about the film. And I'm sure I've got it somewhere. I don't know where it is, but it basically talks about all the process of actually making the film itself. So what he did, how he basically made this new technology, which can now be applied to any film that they want to restore footage of. And I think there is a process where I think he said that he wanted to make it a free technology. So they're working on it a little bit more, and it's going to become free within the next few years for people to be able to restore this footage. But when I got in, sat down, had a read through of how it was made, had a read through of some of the stories and stuff like that, a little kind of bit of dialogue to go before the film. And then it actually started. And you watch all of the faces and all of the stories, and you see the transition from black and white to color. And I got goosebumps. I started crying. Loads of people in the cinema you could hear kind of weeping and stuff like that. I was the youngest person in there. It was me, it was my dad, and then it was people who I assume had parents in the war. And it was such an emotional experience of watching these stories and watching them as if they were in these modern times. Because it's so difficult to look at black and white footage and black and white film and have that kind of connection with it. It almost feels disjointed, like not real. And this experience was probably the realest cinema experience. I know we're ordering it in order of when we saw them, but honestly, this would probably be my number one cinema experience of all time, just purely for what it meant to watch that film on that opening night. And I know that they screened it on BBC One as well afterwards, and now in the UK it's free to watch online. It's part of the school curriculum. Like, they wanted people to see it. It wasn't one of those films where it was, oh, this is the film, you have to kind of pay to go see it and stuff like that. Like, we're going to get as much money from this film as possible. No, this is an experience that wanted to be shared with the world. And I don't want to say that's true cinema, but that for me is just something that is always going to stick with me. And I've got the DVD here as well. I wanted to pay for it. I wanted to put more money back into this film because it deserved it. And it has stuck with me ever since. It truly has.
So I saw it on BBC when it was screened. I can't remember why I couldn't make it to the screening, because I know I was really hyping it. You know, I'm a big fan of Peter Jackson, and even hearing him talk about things, even on like DVD commentaries and stuff, he's always been very vocal about his passion and fascination for World War One. So you could tell it was definitely dear to his heart as well to get this made.
The film itself was dedicated to a couple of his relatives who served in World War One. So.
But I can't remember why I couldn't make it to it. I don't know if I had tickets booked for something else or if it clashed with something. I distinctly remember there was something that came up which meant I couldn't get to it, and I was gutted because it was like a one-time only screening, I think, as well.
It was.
And I didn't know it was going to get put onto TV or anything like that. I thought I'd missed it. Definitely deserved to be an Oscar contender for Best Documentary. I think George, you know more about this. I think they missed out on.
They messed up the paperwork. Some ridiculous. So so it would have won. It would have sweeped it, everything. It was released for one day. I believe it was London Film Festival 2018. So they broadcasted the Q&A at the BFI, with Mark Commode, and they put it in select cinemas. So I missed it because of my sister's birthday when I was in London, so I was gutted. But I picked it up on Blu-ray a couple of months after, watched it because I'm big on the war stuff. My family will watch the BBC broadcast. I was at a football game when that was broadcast, so I missed that, so I was really annoyed because they broadcast it on the actual 100th anniversary on the Sunday after. And That film was very important, and the fact it's now in curriculums is good. You guys know me, I've spoken a lot about the war on the channel and stuff like that. World I once forgotten about, even though more people were killed. People don't talk about the war because how pathetic it started, because 2 royal families fell out, and here we are 100 years later still dealing with nonsense like that. So it's important we have films like that, and Peter Jackson didn't need to be the guy to make a film like that, but he did. He could have done anything, and he chose this low-budget documentary doing this new technology, and I believe he's doing a Beatles documentary now or something like that, where he's doing the same thing. He's got access to never before released footage of them recording an album. So very curious.
It's something that can be applied to anything now. If they've got the footage of it, they will be able to restore it. They just need to smoothen out the process of it.
So I'm going to jump ahead. This is weird because it's going from like, here's a really important historical one to here's Star Wars. I put Last Jedi 2017. Many reasons. First ever red carpet I went to as a fan. Had to queue overnight at the Albert Hall in the freezing cold. This was on the snow week where everything was disrupted, everything was ruined. And it turned out they'd given away half the wristbands, messed everyone about. My first experience with a dodgy red carpet, let's put that politely. And that was an absolute horrible show. So the red carpet happened. It was good fun. It was cool. It was an experience. But then the next day was the day of the film release. We all went together. We got tickets to the double bill. Chris was loving it. Of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi.
You know what? I will say this now, Chris. You were enjoying it a little bit more than you would have been.
I think everyone saw the funny side. Everyone in that screening was laughing at the Hook speech. I think it had been out enough for people to not make memes, but people knew the silly jokes because everyone was there for 8. 7 was like, here's a site. You had to buy a ticket to 7 to watch 8 at midnight. That was the con. It wasn't like a one-off screening. It was you had to have a double bill ticket. Everyone wanted to watch Last Jedi.
See, that's what I thought it was. When you said you got tickets, I was like, oh, excellent. Episode 8, you was like, nah, we're there for 7 and 8. I was like, oh, God. Fine.
I mean, I would have actually... I enjoyed the experience, and I've talked about Last Jedi on this channel a few times, and how I enjoyed the experience of watching the film the first time. However, I didn't really appreciate the film for a while after it. And now that Rise of Skywalker has come out, I really appreciate the film a lot more than I would have done previously. All I'm saying is I wouldn't have wanted to be in a triple bill. No way.
I missed 7 in the triple bill, and then I got the beauty of watching Last Jedi again last year, and then Episode 9 happened.
I just wanted to see, like, if Chris ever did a triple bill of those 3 films.
I would kill myself. I would kill myself. Before I even get to Last Jedi, it would have happened.
I think it was more that because it was Leicester Square, it was the Empire IMAX. I remember Chris running to every cinema in Leicester Square trying to get the popcorn bucket. I won't forget that.
I didn't buy them for Rise of Skywalker. That says volumes. I
bought one. There was a weird Kylo Ren one. It looked really cool, so it sits on my window. But I just think that experience. I mentioned Infinity War, how I hated the crowd thing. I think the big difference was that people were cheering in Star Wars, but because everyone was there at the same time, everyone cheered at the same moments.
And they know when to be quiet as well.
Yes.
That's the big thing.
The throne room scene, to me, when that happened, I think I kind of was ready to go, but I didn't want to be the first one to cheer. And then when one does, they all did, and that was incredible. But that was the experience of that, was that, that was a group of people there for the same thing. It's not different fan bases. Avengers, you've got your Spider-Man fans, your Thanos, well, not then, but your Spider-Man, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor. Everyone joined was too much because they were cheering at the different times. And then you're right, they couldn't shut up. But Last Jedi was perfect. Quick jump onto Episode 9. A couple of people cheered at the beginning. No one clapped at the ending, but people were clapping for the Tenet prologue. So there's that to look forward to. But that's
Chris,
that.
I'm going to jump ahead of you here because my next pick is somewhat themed into the fact that it's a Star Wars film and we were all there together at the same time. This is a different experience. This was the first time I'd seen Star Wars A New Hope in any cinematic format. I'd always watched it at home. I'd always watched it on whether it was a VHS, a really dodgy VHS copy that my dad had, or whether it was a DVD or something like that. But going to go see Star Wars at the Royal Albert Hall, still have the ticket on my desk, and meeting up with you guys, it was a really good experience. It was really cool listening to the orchestra for all of the scenes. I mean, just chills all over my body when like Binary Sunset was playing and everything like that. There is also some interesting things that happen there as part of the cinematic experience.
Well, it is memorable experience, right?
We haven't talked about this before. This is a fun little anecdote. This program right here is not my program. This program, in fact, is a program that belonged to someone who was sat in front of us. Now, basically what happened was this person sat in front of us, spilled his drink, and he spilled it over my program. And this program was quite expensive. So I tapped him on the shoulder and said, "I'm really sorry, mate, but you spilled your drink all over my program. Is there something that you can do about it?" Because I don't know how much this is worth, whether it was 20 quid or something like that. I know it's expensive. But it became a weird staring off contest between me and this guy, and Chris and George also joined in, and the person who was sat next to him also tapped him on the shoulder. He got it.
He's named and shamed.
I can't believe we got the photo up. So that's me holding this sopping wet program, and that's the guy in front. Sorry for calling this guy out. Imagine if he was watching this, I would be pissing myself laughing. But it ended up with him looking very awkward and very ashamed of himself. And I'm not sure whether he had a full fun experience at the cinema, but I definitely did. And I got my 20 quid program back. And yeah, there's the story of the program. And what a great fun experience that was.
It was more like he was loving it till he like pretended he didn't speak any English, but then his mates were telling him go and buy a new program. That's what made it funnier. And he was just turning around like that face we put up. I'm not going to change it too long, but that was the complete face. He was like, "I don't know what you're on about." It's like, "You do." Like the thing is that it was funnier for me and Chris because it wasn't our program. Like you were far too polite. Had that been me, that would have been a very, very, very different.
It was a very kind of polite look, dude. You spilled your drink all over my program. Program costs a lot of money. Could you please either repay me the program or could I please have your program? And he just didn't know what to say or do. Because
we were in the same row. You two were sat together, and then I was further down the row, so I could see something was kicking off. But I was like, I think I was messaging you, George. Like, what's cracking off? What's happening? And I mean, the year later, I went to Empire Strikes Back. I was just on my own for that one, and I've got to tell you, it was nowhere near as fun without a program gate happening. So I missed you guys on that one. But
yeah, that was my experience with Star Wars: A New Hope at the Royal Albert Hall. And I will say, anyone going to see any concerts at the Royal Albert Hall, they are really, really good. Would highly recommend it. And I'm looking forward to whatever one comes out next. I know you guys have said that there's possibly a Harry Potter one happening at some point in the future.
They've been doing them, I think. They've been going for a while.
I am going to jump onto the next one that comes up of that one then when things reopen and stuff like that.
I've got tickets for Fellowship and Return of the Jedi this year. I really hope that goes ahead, but we'll have to see if the inevitable second wave hits at some point. But right, okay, so I'm moving on to my number two pick. Yeah, number two pick. Yeah. So we're going to the genre of horror because horror films, especially when you've got a packed crowd, are always brilliant. This is where I really quickly throw some honorable mentions in there. The first three Paranormal Activity films were some of the best I've ever seen. They'd probably be in a top 10 list if I were going to do it. But this was a very different horror film. This is 2017. This was It Chapter 1. And I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, was this the first film that all three of us went to see together?
Yes, it was.
I think so, yeah.
Because I know, George, me and you went to see Rogue One.
Yeah.
But and then we went to see Last Jedi at the end of the year. Okay, so this was the first time we all got to meet up and go and see a film. What a film it was. Now, the film itself wasn't that great, but I tell you what, it was one of the most enjoyable cinema going experience I've ever had in my life. It came out around the height of the whole clown craze, like weird people dressed as clowns. Thankfully, we didn't see any. If there was one guy dressed as a clown in that screening, then I would probably have left, in all honesty. But the enjoyment of this screening, obviously it was great to see all of us together, and seeing the film was fun in and of itself. It was scaring Tayte. So Tayte, you're not like a big horror guy. I think neither of you are, to be fair.
Jump scares get me every time. Look, I want to point this out here. I'm not scared of it, the film, but any jump scare, I will jump.
And jump scare you, we did. Me and George made it our mission to try and get a high score of how many jump scares we could get out of Tayte. And
I've planned my revenge for George because we're going to absolutely get him sat down watching Jaws at some point.
Yes. They did a re-screening like a couple of years ago, and I really wanted George to go to it, but we will.
I might pass out.
Imagine a 3D remake. It would be just fantastic.
I don't think I'd literally have a heart attack during that film.
But yeah, I mean, I don't really have much else to say about it. The film is what it is. I still haven't seen Chapter 2, but my God, that was a fun screening to be at.
It was fun. It was the fact it was midnight. You're right. The clown craze was incredible. I remember YouTube videos of clowns getting battered by people, clowns scaring people. I think it was because it was coming out, and it actually just did the marketing for it. Was
it a kind of weird urban kind of marketing?
It was. I don't think it was intentional, but there was like blokes just dressing up as clowns, and people are scared. I think certainly in America, I think the clown fear is higher than here. I think clowns are more traditional in America for parties than they are over in England, because over here we know they're all pedos. In America, they're probably like vaguely normal people. But it was more the fact that, like I said, Tate, you're easy to get with the jump scares. Chris, you love horror films. I'm not big on them because I know what's coming and I brace for it. Except Jaws, I don't really get the enjoyment out of horror films because I'm not getting scared. Don't mean that to sound too arrogant, but it's not my main forte. I've seen them. I don't know if the Shining sequel counts as horror, but
yeah, it counts as horror. Psychological horror, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a good fun for the screening. It was fun. That's the main thing.
Okay, back on to you, George.
So, minority. So this is an experience like no other. And I think we can all do this when the cinemas reopen, hopefully in February next year. The Prince Charles Cinema is one of the probably most popular. I guess it's an individual non-chain cinema. It's independent cinema. It's based in Leicester Square. Spotlight casting's above it. It's right by all of the cinemas. It's on the back of Chinatown, and they are famous for cult screenings. They do marathons, which we'll get to shortly. They do marathons, an actor, films, franchises. They do special screenings. They show things on film, on reel. They get directors in, Q&As. Tarantino was there last year. You know, it's probably the most famous cult cinema in England. And I went for the very first time at the start of 2018 for The Room. Now, I'd never seen The Room at this point. The Disaster Artist had come out, and I'd put off watching it because I hadn't seen The Room, and I'd braced myself for the first time I could. So I went with one of my good friends who lives in London. We got tickets, and the special thing with this is that they show it once a month normally, but for 2 weeks every February and November, they basically show it 3 times a day because they have Tommy Wiseau and Greg Sestero fly in. They always do a Q&A before the film. They are sat at the bar during the film to do autographs. You have to buy merch to meet them and to get the autographs and photos and stuff, but it's this collective event where all these people come to watch the film. Now, I've never seen it, and neither had my friend. We all know its reputation. But so we sat at the back row, and the cinema's weird. It's like a hill. The seats are like that. And I was like, okay, we can experience this. And my friend's like, apparently people get involved. I was like, I don't really know how. We're at a cinema, but okay. And then it kind of happened where the word spoon was shouted, and suddenly like 200 spoons. It's like the arrows in 300. Just go in front of the cinema. I was like, what on earth's going on? And then they're all chanting the lines as they happen. And, you know, normally this would annoy me if it was like a midnight, but because this is a cult reputation, that this happens here twice a year for 2 weeks at a time, the fact that Tommy was out before being weird, Greg Sestero was just awkward. I went out during the film and met Tommy. I got a photo with him. And you had to buy the room, but it's ridiculously charged. Like, I think it was like 15 or 20 quid for the Blu-ray.
I'd be okay with that.
I was fine doing it.
With that.
I forgot to ask him for the autograph. Not that it matched. I got a photo, but that experience was something else. It's something I can never get over. I want to do it again. Now I've seen the film, it'll be even funnier. But there were people that knew every word that were there, and that was what was crazy. Every screening pretty much sells out. Nothing like it. Incredible experience for the wrong reasons. And then I got to watch The Disaster Artist literally the next day. I was like, this is actually really funny. But that was The Room, and I hope we can all get there. I think we discussed it at one point, but it's just obviously right now it's all a bit awkward, and that cinema hopefully reopening in September. So we'll find out what happens with that.
Do you want me? Because I've got a Prince Charles Cinema one as my next one.
I mean, my next one's Leicester Square, and these are all our last ones. So
okay, I'll jump in with mine then. So my number one pick, going back to the Prince Charles Cinema for this one. It was in 2017 in the December. I did a Lord of the Rings extended edition trilogy marathon. It is still the only marathon of those films I have done to this day. I did a Tempt one with friends on DVD. We got to the first disc of Two Towers. I think Treebeard hit, and we all just turned to ourselves and just said, "What are we doing?" And we just turned it off. Treebeard scene started getting skipped, and I was annoyed. I was like, "No, we're in this beginning to end. We have to watch the whole thing." This was my opportunity to watch it, and I didn't realize they were still closed. I hope they are in a good way, and they do manage to bounce back. I'm sure they will do. Very, very niche cinema, and you're right, the whole hill thing, which kind of threw me when I sat down to watch it. I mean, I don't need to say it. Lord of the Rings are my favorite films of all time. It's quite actually a convenient time in my local is playing all the extended editions. Thankfully, not all together in a marathon. They're doing one each day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. In a couple of hours, I'm off to see Two Towers. But this was an experience. So I went with a few people to it. A couple of uni friends, and when the first line kicked in of the first movie, we were like, "Oh God, it's happening! It's happening! There's no escape." It's like when you get locked into a roller coaster and it starts moving off. You're like, "Oh God, we can't stop this train from rolling," kind of thing. And it's no bad thing, and it was great. But you kind of, after the first movie had finished, and you had a 5 to 10 minute break, and then the second movie started, you were like, "Oh." And actually, Tom on the channel, if we've got any long-time watchers of the channel, he came to watch the marathon with us, and he left after movie 1.
Wow!
And I'm like, "Did you know what you were signing up for? Weakness."
You didn't say they're in the middle of the night, though, aren't they? As well.
Yeah. So it started at 9 p.m. and I believe it had finished at about 8 a.m. the following day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is grim.
It was a whole thing because they played the extended credits as well. I don't know if any of you have watched the extended editions. Literally, the credits to Two Towers were about 45 minutes apiece. It was crazy. I think they used that so that everyone could get to the toilet and everything like that. But it was mad. It was when we had the really bad snow as well. So I thought I was going to get stranded in London at the time. But it was great. You get a survivor picture afterwards as well. If you do a marathon, they do for any, it is literally survivors. We look like we'd survived a nuclear apocalypse or a zombie outbreak or something. All these bedraggled, sleep deprived, horrible, disgusting looking people, myself included. I did. I really did. Mid-transformation Smeagol, absolutely. And you get a picture. But you could just see the look of regret on everyone's face when Return of the King started. Because, you marathon TV shows, if you watch Netflix, you can binge stuff on Netflix. There's an incremental period of I am making an advancement in this series. If the episodes are half hour, 45 minutes to an hour, when you sit down and go, "I'm here for 3 hours, 15 minutes. It ends. Next one starts. I am here for 3.5 hours. The final one starts. I'm here for 4 hours, 10 minutes. It's a lot. It's a hell of a lot. But they're my favorite films. It was great to say I've finally done. I feel like I should have got a T-shirt I survived the Lord of the Rings extended edition marathon or something. It was great to see them on. It was the first time I got to see them on the big screen, so it was reliving that whole thing again. I remember seeing Return of the King when that first came out way back in 2003, but it was great to sort of appreciate them on the big screen again, notice things that you've missed. We talked about that on Empire Strikes Back, where when you see it blown up to a big screen, you notice little things in the background that maybe you haven't seen before, or certain lines of dialogue in the case of Empire Strikes Back. But no, it was a great experience. I think it's one of the only times I've been to the cinema, actually. It might be the only time I've actually been there, but I'd love to go back again, hopefully when they reopen and get some awesome marathons back on.
Okay, my final pick was very recent. In fact, we talked a reasonable amount of it on the channel. It was the London Film Festival films. Now, I'm grouping a couple of films into this one because this was quite a nice experience for me. I know that George had gone previous year to see a couple of the films and stuff like that, but for me, it's myself to go up and see these films, these Oscar films, before I go off to Austria, because I don't have the chance to go to cinema whilst out there, was really good. And I'm glad that these were the films that came out this year, because Knives Out, for me, hilarious. Loved it. Start to finish. Rian Johnson, genius. And it's rightfully got a sequel coming out. One of the best murder mysteries I've seen in years. Just a fantastic overall film. Happily watch it on repeat. We'll probably watch it today at some stage. It is just one of those films that I can easily stick on over and over again. Jojo Rabbit, hilarious. Probably the loudest laughing I've ever heard in a cinema screening ever. And George will be a testament to that. Everyone in the screening was pissing themselves laughing throughout the entire film. And even though the film itself has a heart, it has kind of a story, it has the message and everything like that, it is one of Taika Waititi's best. I love What We Do in the Shadows, but Jojo Rabbit as well is.
I think it's his best. I definitely think it's his best.
Fantastic. And Marriage Story, the surprise one, the one which I didn't know much about going into, which ended up being one of the most just emotional, heartbreaking films that I could have watched. And that one gets me as well. That one is something that stuck with me, and I can't even remember. I think it was my number one of the year. I can't even remember at this stage what I put as my number one of the year now, but it is one of those films that it hit hard, and it will continue to hit hard when I rewatch it over and over again. But the actual experience going into Leicester Square, going and seeing these films in the deluxe seats, I mean, for a couple of those films, me and George, a couple of others who are friends with the channel, we all sat in like the nicest seats you could, the proper recline ones, the box seats and everything like that, and just the entire experience, just fantastic. Loved it. Can't wait to do it again if they are going to be doing it this year.
It was a great experience. I mean, that's the main thing. Like, you see the prices of the Odeon in Leicester Square, and it's like £40 a ticket. It's like, how was that free? I think that was the biggest coup of all of it. It was a great week. This year, it looks like it's going to be online, so that might make it a bit easier for us. Instead of being in London, I can be in bed and watching the Oscar films. Probably put them on for my family, actually. Don't know if you get done for that, but oh well.
But this pass gets us everywhere now. And the only other film that I would add on to that would be The Lighthouse, not for the actual screening of The Lighthouse, but because I bumped into Willem Dafoe afterwards and got a photo.
It was quality. It was a great week. I still regret bottling Adam Driver. I met him again and forgot, and was too scared to ask him for a photo again. So I have to live with that.
It was really funny. Me and George randomly walking through London. We bumped into Kit Harington. We just randomly walked past him and asked for a photo, but he was busy. But he was a nice guy to just kind of bump into and talk to.
It was like Soho. I was like, is that Carrington? He's like, he's tiny.
It was so funny because the way you said it's Jon Snow, and I was like, the news reporter, and you're like, no, Jon fucking Snow.
He's tiny. I ran on the other side of the road just to like scout him out. I mean, when someone's got a bag with poster tubes, he knows straight away walking through London what's going to be asked. But they've got no right to do photos. But he seemed pleasant enough, and he was flying to America the next day for his convention at £200 per photograph. But different story. I'm going to jump onto my last one. This is weird because it's split across 2 years. Again, 3 of us. So I put Dark Knight, and this is for 2 reasons. It had a 10th anniversary re-release in 2018. This was just before I moved to London. I finished a shift at 2:30, and basically when they started doing these were like 9 o'clock at night screenings, as the BFI IMAX always does. And it's horrible because if you don't live in London, you can't get there. You literally can't go to most of the good screenings of all films. And then they appeased and they put some at like 4:30. So I remember finishing work at like lunchtime, getting on a train straight from work, went to the IMAX in London, watched The Dark Knight, went home, then came back. I messaged all of you like, we all need to see this film at the BFI IMAX. We all have to go. There's no questions. And we did. The BFI IMAX is the biggest cinema in our country. To me, it's the best. It's not my favorite screen in the country. That is still the Empire IMAX in Leicester Square. But BFI is the kind of the mecca of a Christopher Nolan film. I think that's the best way of putting it. That is it's shown. They pride themselves on showing it on film reel, not digital, which is what he wants. There's signed posters of his in the auditorium. It is the place to watch his films. But like the biggest cinema in the country. Didn't like it for Infinity War. Didn't like it for Episode 9. Didn't work for them. Obviously got the Tenet prologue. But there was something about The Dark Knight. And I don't know if it's because it was shown on film. I don't want to sound like a film snob. But because of the impact that had on me in 2008, and that put me on the journey I'm on now, I wouldn't have got into film the way I have. It wasn't for that release. Seeing that 10 years later, on the week of watching that for the first time, I found I got my first job in the film industry, which obviously didn't go down too well, which you two for one of the stories. I'll tell you all about it one day when the company go bust after coronavirus. But it was just something. I hate the pathetic words like coincidence. It was meant to be, but there was something in all that, and it felt right. And then going with you guys again, I think there was a big auction on, so we saw loads of like film props as well. That was really cool. But that film in that cinema, the opening scene, the truck scene, everything about it was just phenomenal. Even the little black bops of when they need to switch the reel around. that was, to me, coinciding with 2008 and 18 together. That has to be the best experience ever. Like I said, if it had been the top rankings, I think this would probably be in the top 3 of the direct. But my word, if the chances come, when they did under Christopher Nolan season at the start of the year, they were all 9 o'clock showings again. And you can't, I can drive to London fine, but I don't really want to drive home at midnight from the BFI IMAX. Especially when you watch films like Interstellar or Dunkirk, which is it's shorter than the actual drive to London. So that's my final film in this. I think it's fitting that we may have Tenet out next month.
Yeah.
And that's the Nolan film to finish this conversation on.
Yes.
I think with all the different films, we've had films overall together. We've had different genres. We've had different eras, different years. And I think this has been quite remarkable. And not to go on a downer again, I'm going to use this quick end of me talking to say, again, cinemas are going in a dire state. So fingers crossed we are all back, because as Chris said at the very, very beginning, we don't know what we're doing right now because there's no film out.
We're flailing our arms around like hoping something happens.
If needed, we will keep on doing these style videos if you guys enjoy it. Like we enjoy talking about film as much, whether it's new films, old films, stuff like that. And it's good to finally get this opportunity to talk about past cinema experiences. But we want to hear your favorite cinema experiences down below. Please comment those down there, and we will respond to them when we can. Also, like us on Facebook. Our Facebook page is Cinema Savvy. On Twitter @cinema_savvy. Instagram @cinema_savvy as well. And if you want to pick up a t-shirt on TeePublic, because it is really soft and really comfy and looks cool.
And that will be the quote of Tayte 2020. It's very soft and very comfy. But no, this was awesome to sort of look back. This was a good conversation. I always love these conversations. It's like a catch up for us, really, isn't it? Because we always talk movies anyway. It's not just a thing we do on the channel. We do talk movies pretty much all the time as well. And I think all of the experiences that we've said have been different in some way, and meaningful. That's really, really cool. And hopefully when cinemas open back up properly, we'll have a lot more memories and memorable films that come out later on down the line. Maybe that'll be 2021 though. But so thank you for everyone. Well, no one's watched this at the moment. Hopefully people watch this later on today. So this will be going up later today. Let us know your favorite experiences, and we will be back with something. We have, as we've said, August is going to be a very Christopher Nolan themed month. So if you are a Christopher Nolan fan, make sure to hit the subscribe button and follow us for that. But we were back with more quizzes, more discussions. We might throw some reviews in there of older movies and stuff as and when. But this has been fun. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time. Bye.